Welcome, everybody, to a bowl edition of UCF football now. Regular season is over. UCF couldn't quite get into the Cotton Bowl by winning the American Athletic Conference championship game, but they are going to a bowl game. We're going to get into that and a lot of other topics. I'm Mike Bianchi, sports columnist of the Orlando Sentinel. That man over there is your UCF insider. Nobody covers UCF as closely as Jason Beede, OrlandoSentinel.com beat writer for our newspaper. All right, Jason, let's start out by paying a bit of a tribute. A sad news came earlier this week when former UCF tight end Jake Hescock passed away at the young age of 25 years old. He was jogging up in Boston, had a cardiac arrest, gets rushed to the hospital, is put on life support, but he passes away a few days later. Jason, you've had some personal dealings with Jake Hescock. Obviously, many tributes coming from the UCF football family. Tell us about Jake Hescock.
Yeah, Jake was one of the best dudes that we talked with. I mean, he was just a really good person, a really funny guy. I had quite a few interactions with him. He had transferred from Wisconsin in 2017 and really got to see the field a ton in 2018, 19, and of course 20. And then he returned for a sixth season last year. And it was just always a pleasure talking with Jake. I mean, he was always one of the veteran leaders down the stretch and someone we talk with often. And Brandon Helwig of UCFsports.com shared a clip over the weekend of Jake Hescock, and when he pulled a prank on us during the COVID season when everything was virtual, he had a fake hand and it fell off when it came up to the podium over Zoom. So talking with him over time, and he was just really dedicated to his craft and a great person, and such a tragic loss. And I'm sure UCF will honor his life some way. Unfortunately, the same way they did for Otis Anderson when he passed away last year. So I'm sure they'll honor him by wearing a patch or something special for the bowl game, of course, and all the messages from, guys like Gus Malzahn and Josh Heupel and former coaches, and Danny White put out a message, and Terry Mahajer. Just, you could tell that the impact Jake had on a lot of people in the UCF community. So obviously a tragic loss, and I feel terrible for his family.
Yeah, obviously our thoughts and prayers do go out to the Jake Hescock family. Let's transition. All right, even though the college football regular season is over, a lot going on in college football. The transfer portal opened a week ago, and man, has it been busy. Let's talk about some of the players who've left UCF. Mikey Keene, obviously, that was announced on the day of the conference championship game when he chose not to play in that. Devontae Brown, one of their star cornerbacks. Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste, one of their best linebackers. And then, of course, their best wide receiver, Ryan O'Keefe. How big are those losses, Jason?
Yeah, I think Ryan O'Keefe is the one that probably hurts UCF the most. I think there were a couple young guys, Cam Moore, a freshman linebacker that played a lot when Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste missed a couple games, and they have depth at corner. And Devontae Brown almost left last season but decided to return, and it's not a surprise that he's leaving. But Ryan O'Keefe, to me, is the one where I think for the average UCF fan, you think about Ryan and the deuces he threw up in the Gasparilla Bowl and just how much they used him last season. One of the most versatile players in all college football. That one was a bit of a surprise. I think in the days prior to his decision, I had heard some rumblings about it. And I just think for him, he stayed 4 years and earned his degree at UCF. And like I said, was one of the most versatile players for them: punt return, kick return, running the ball, catching the ball. But for him, he's the star guy. He's the guy that a lot of people, a name, recognize. And for him to leave, I think probably surprised the average fan for sure. So that's going to be a big loss. It's going to be tough to replace Ryan O'Keefe.
Obviously, and UCF fans lamenting the loss of Ryan O'Keefe, sort of like last year. They were lamenting the loss of Dylan Gabriel into the transfer portal, and they were lamenting the loss of Jalen Robinson, another star receiver at UCF. But guess what? Gus Malzahn and his coaching staff, they came up and hit the transfer portal hard. They brought in a lot of really good transfers, like John Rice Plumlee at quarterback, like Javon Baker at wide receiver. Who are we looking at that UCF could bring in from the portal?
Yeah, I want to be clear that it's really early in the process. Obviously, the portal just opened up, and UCF hosted official visits this past weekend. They'll continue to host official visits throughout December and January and February, and when they're allowed to, of course, during certain periods of the month. They're targeting guys like Christian Leary, an Alabama transfer wide receiver who played at Edgewater with R.J. Harvey, Duquesne wide receiver, and another JUCO wide receiver that's potentially has an interest. Desno Washington from Iowa Central is the guy that they hosted for an official visit. So there's multiple guys at wide receiver. They're looking after some defensive players as well. And of course, they have to wrap up high school signing day, which is on December 21st. We'll get into that later. But for transfers, I want to be clear that this is really early in the process. You mentioned Javon Baker, obviously a star receiver that they added, and it was massive this season for the Knights. He wasn't even an option for UCF until May. He had been committed to Kentucky for the longest time, and then when the enrollment time came, they just didn't decide that they wanted him anymore, basically. And he was in need of a home real quick, and UCF swooped in and grabbed him up, and it was a great decision for them. And they added Kobe Hudson too last season. So I think it's going to be a wait and see, and there's going to be guys UCF has on the roster next year that's probably still aren't even in the portal yet, because there's going to be more portal entries after the spring and in the summer as well.
Yeah, there's going to be more portal entries after signing day and after the bowl game. So we shall see. But let's talk about National Signing Day. That's next week, the early signing period, which now is the main signing period. It used to be February was the big signing day, but now it's the signing day in December. That's the big one. How is UCF doing as far as high school recruiting? Is Gus Malzahn doing well?
Yeah, they're closing strong, I think. They had a really good summer. Guys like Braden Marshall from Lake Mary, and of course John Walker from Osceola are some really big names. They've had Caven Call from Apopka, committed almost a full year. He committed last Christmas. One of the first commitments in this class for Gus Malzahn was Call. And they've done a really good job. Andrew and Michael Harris from Lake Brantley. They've just done a great job of recruiting local guys. And that was something Gus Malzahn said. We saw it last cycle, of course, as well, recruiting guys like Nikai Martinez, among others. But this class is a talented one. I think they're having a bit of a challenge keeping on to some of these guys. John Walker recently took an official visit to Florida. And Braden Marshall just received an offer from Auburn with Hugh Freeze up there. So they're having to close strong. They're making sure they can get the signing day with a good class. And of course, they're going to fill holes with the transfer portal. So obviously the main focus is recruiting the state of Orlando, as they like to call it.
Absolutely. Wasn't that the knock on Josh Heupel, that he didn't recruit Orlando good enough?
Yeah, that was one of the biggest concerns with him, as you saw over time, the way he recruited. I mean, he just kind of lost a local relationship with some of the coaches in the area. And I think when Gus Malzahn was hired, he understood how important it was to recruit the area of Orlando and really hit home that, the phrase they like to use is the hometown hero. And that's something that's really important to UCF. And you can see that in some of the commitments they have and some of the kids they'll sign locally.
Yeah, and obviously, high school recruiting is still very important to building a program, but the transfer portal has changed high school recruiting. In fact, there are some high school coaches out there who are saying it's all but ruined high school recruiting. I don't know if I'd go that far. I would say, though, that it has changed high school recruiting dramatically. What do you see, Jason?
Yeah, I wouldn't go as far as to say it's ruined it. I think, like you mentioned, most coaches are aware of the fact that you can fill some holes, fill some gaps real quick, the same way UCF has done, adding quarterback, adding wide receiver. But to really build your program the right way, you need to focus on building a foundation. That starts with high school recruiting. So, yes, it definitely hurts some kids for sure. There's no doubt about that. But I think when you're building your program over the course of time, 4 or 5 years, you need to start with high school recruiting.
All right, let's talk about the bowl game, the Military Bowl. Obviously, UCF Nation, Knight Nation, hoping for the Cotton Bowl. Well, that's not going to happen. But guess what? The Military Bowl, they have an opponent that's pretty fired up about going to a bowl game this year. Duke had a good season, 8-4. They're excited about going to the Military Bowl. UCF fans and UCF players better not take Duke lightly or go into that bowl game sort of ho-hum. We wish we were in the Cotton Bowl, because Duke's going to be fired up.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a Duke team that hasn't gone bowling in a couple of years. First-year head coach Mike Elko was named the ACC Coach of the Year. They were one game out from playing the ACC championship. So this is a really challenging team. I think you've seen the past where maybe if UCF has go to a New Year's Six, they're going to play a 6-6 SEC or a 6-6 ACC team or whatever it may be, and it maybe not be the exciting opponent. But look, this is an exciting opportunity for UCF. They're playing a bowl game they've never played against an opponent they've never faced. That's really untypical for this UCF program if they're not going to a New Year's Six, of course. But this is a really exciting matchup. Duke's a really good football team. They have a pretty solid quarterback, and obviously it's in the ACC. You think of Duke as a basketball school, but they've come on of late under Mike Elko for sure.
Was this a bowl game that now obviously UCF wanted to go to the Cotton Bowl, but taking the Cotton Bowl, you had to earn that, all right? But was the Military Bowl a bowl game that UCF wanted to go to, or was it like the AAC's decision to put them in the Military Bowl?
Well, I think, ESPN has a say in this. UCF, the teams have to agree to it. The conference has a say in it. I asked Gus Malzahn if they wanted to play a Power 5 opponent, and I'm pretty sure that was something they wanted to focus on. I don't think they necessarily wanted to play on the Gasparilla Bowl again. I think fan turnout obviously will be better if they had played in the Florida Bowl compared to Annapolis, Maryland, a couple days after Christmas. But I think the opponent was really important. And this isn't a chance for UCF to win 10 games and maybe get another win over a Power 5 team in Duke and then head off to the Big 12 with a win.
Speaking of the Big 12, the countdown is on. 201 days from today before the Big 12 season starts for UCF. Schedule comes out later in the week. What are fans hoping for on this schedule?
Yeah, I think they're hoping for Texas or Oklahoma. It's ironic that those are the schools that are on the way out, and they're the reason UCF's on the way in. But I think when you look at the storylines, Texas, obviously being UCF's first home game in the Bounce House, that would be a really great, bookend to this whole thing. And Oklahoma, I don't know exactly what Dylan Gabriel's deciding to do, but if he decides to come back, obviously UCF fans would want to play him. And I think playing brands like that is exciting. UCF was in the American for close to 10 years, and you're going to be, instead of playing teams like SMU or Memphis or Temple or ECU, you're going to be playing Kansas State and Texas Tech and traveling to these real college towns. So I think UCF fans would love to play Texas or Oklahoma before they depart the Big 12. But I think they're just excited for whatever the schedule is.
Texas would be great, but I'd really love to see Oklahoma and Dylan Gabriel coming back to Orlando. That would be an awesome storyline. All right, let's do a little rapid fire, shall we? Let's start with, UCF lost to Navy, cost themselves a chance to host the AAC championship game. Well, guess what? Navy goes on and loses to Army, and then they fire their longtime head coach. And I'm not very good at pronouncing his name, so I'm just going to say that Navy fired Coach Ken. Were you surprised?
Yeah, I was surprised. I mean, you talked about the expectations at a school like Navy. I mean, he'd been there for, I think, almost 25 years. That was a surprise to me, for sure. Also, a bit of a surprise to me, USF hiring former UCF coordinator Alex Golish. You think that's a good fit, Mike?
Well, I mean, obviously USF fans were hoping they were going to get some huge name, and that didn't happen. Deion Sanders was mentioned, John Gruden was mentioned, Jamie Chadwell, Coastal Carolina was mentioned. Well, guess what? They had to settle for Alex Golish. But you know what? I think Alex Golish could be a good fit. He's been a recruiting coordinator at a number of schools. He obviously has some Florida connections because he did coach at UCF and he has coached with Josh Heupel at Tennessee. So I think he could be a decent fit, quite honestly. All right, JRP announced last week he is coming back for his 6th year of eligibility next year. How good a news is this for UCF?
Yeah, this is really good news. I mean, obviously they had Thomas Castellanos, who they really like as their future. They brought in Timmy McClain before the season. He had to sit out this year. They're going to sign a high school quarterback, but to have 4 quarterbacks on scholarship is massive. That will avoid, burning any red shirts or having to deal with anything like that. I think John Rice, whether or not he plays baseball this spring, is going to be a storyline to follow for sure. Another player UCF that will have back is Alec Holler. We know about the Holler Hop, the Holy Holler, Mike. How great is this news?
Holy holler, he's coming back. That's great news. I mean, obviously, we talk a lot about the transfer portal and players jumping into the portal because they want to go someplace else. Well, Alec Holler is the complete opposite of that. Obviously, he grew up a UCF fan. He went to UCF games as a kid, and now he's going to come back because, as he said in your story, I just love this place. And for a guy to want to come back because he loves the school, he loves the program, I think it's refreshing in today's transfer portal world. All right, we just mentioned JRP. Jason, I sort of want you to give me some kudos because before the season, I predicted that John Rice Plumlee would finish with more yards of total offense than the outgoing Dillon Gabriel at Oklahoma. And before the show, I just looked this up. Let me see. Dillon Gabriel, total yards 3,223. JRP 3,245. By my math, Jason Beede, JRP 22 more yards of total offense than Dillon Gabriel. Where's the kudos?
You got me there, Mike. I was wrong. I didn't think he'd be able to, outrun or outthrow Dillon Gabriel in that Oklahoma offense. Obviously, both quarterbacks dealt with injuries this season, but props to you for making that pick right.
Thank you, Jason. Your affirmation is all I need to make my life a success.
I'm glad to know that, Mike.
All right, that will do it for another edition of UCF Football Now. We may do another show after the bowl game. We're not sure yet, but make sure to tell all your friends about us. You can watch us at OrlandoSentinel.com. We usually drop on a Tuesday. We also have our own YouTube channel. Until next time, for Jason Beede, I'm Mike Bianchi, and this has been another edition of UCF Football Now.